They mocked her for marrying a PSP worker, unaware he is a trillionaire in disguise. Then this happened. To my wonderful viewers who pointed out errors in the first video, here's the story again, and this time you get the full version exactly as it should be. Now, let the story begin. The day Adaeze told her family she was marrying the garbage man, her mother fainted. Not dramatically, not for show. She simply sat down on the floor of her own kitchen and her legs gave out. Her aunties said Adaeze had lost her mind. Her colleagues said she was desperate. Her childhood friends stopped calling. And the whole village of Umueze, every market woman, every church elder, every person who had ever borrowed salt from her mother's kitchen, they all said the same thing. That girl has thrown her life away. But here is what every single one of them got wrong. The man driving that orange PSP truck every Tuesday and Friday morning was not who they thought he was, not even close. His name was Emmanuel Osei, and he was worth more money than every building in Umueze combined. This is what happened when they found out. Adaeze Okonkwo was 32 years old. In Umueze, that single fact followed her everywhere like a shadow. Not her degree, not her job teaching literature at the community secondary school, not the way she could silence a room of 40 restless teenagers with one raised eyebrow. None of that mattered. She was 32, unmarried, and in Umueze, that was the only story people wanted to tell about a woman. Now, to be clear, Adaeze was not struggling to be noticed. She was tall, with skin like polished mahogany, and eyes that carried entire libraries behind them. She walked like someone who had read every book worth reading and arrived somewhere the rest of you were still heading. Men noticed her. They just never quite survived long enough to become her husband. Her mother, Mama Chidima, was a small, round woman built entirely from worry and eucalyptus oil. She smelled of ogiri and determination. She had spent 4 years arranging introductions with the precision of a military general. There was the pharmacist from Enugu. He talked about himself for 3 hours and never once asked Adaeze her name. There was the civil servant from Abuja, married already, a small detail he had forgotten to mention. There was Chief Okafor's nephew, young, handsome, and promising, who had pawned his own mother's sewing machine to pay a gambling debt. Each failure arrived in Mama Chidima's chest like a stone dropped into still water. So when Adaeze sat across from her one Sunday evening, the kerosene lamp hissing between them, and said quietly, "Mama, there is someone I want you to meet," Mama Chidima's eyes filled with tears before the sentence was finished. "Who is he? Is he educated? What does his father do?" Adaeze breathed slowly. "His name is Emmanuel. He is kind. He is honest. He treats me like I am the only person in every room we enter. And his work." Adaeze looked at her mother. She breathed again. "He works for a PSP company, Mama, sanitation crew." The silence in that compound was so complete you could have heard a lizard blink. Then Mama Chidima laughed. Not joy, not disbelief, but something worse, something hollow like a drum with nothing inside. "Adaeze, my daughter, my first daughter, 9 months I carried you, 3 extra days, I paid your school fees, I watched you collect your university degree, I put it on the wall with my own hands. Mama, you want to bring a garbage man into this family?" It had begun. Within 48 hours, Umueze knew. The way Hamatan spreads dust, without permission, without apology, into every corner. Mama Tochukwu at the borehole, the hair salon on Igbe Road, the women's fellowship, the family WhatsApp group. The messages came in waves. "Adaeze, please tell me this is not true. A PSP worker, Tufia. She must be pregnant, that is the only explanation. Desperation is understandable, my dear, but have some standards." At school, Mrs. Eze cornered her in the staff room, hand pressed to chest, personally wounded. "Adaeze, you, of all people, A woman with your figure, your education, your everything, and you chose a man who collects other people's waste? Adaize considered her response carefully. She chose silence. Mrs. Eze took that silence as permission to keep talking. She always did. But here is the thing Mrs. Eze did not know. Emmanuel had dropped Adaize at the school gate that very morning, not in the PSP truck, in a dust-covered Toyota Land Cruiser, quietly expensive, the kind of car that whispers rather than shouts. He opened her door, kissed her hand, and gave him his slow, unhurried smile. Then he drove away before anyone could look closely. Adaize had watched him go. She felt, as she always did around Emmanuel, like she was standing at the edge of very deep water. She could not see the bottom, but she was not afraid, not even slightly. Emmanuel Ose was not from Omueze. He was Ghanaian by birth, Nigerian by 12 years of deliberate choice. He spoke Igbo with an accent that made children giggle and elders nod with approval. He knew every compound head on his 3 serviced streets. He remembered birthdays. He brought kola nut when visiting. He apologized to the earth when he had to uproot a plant. By every visible measure, he was a simple man. He rented a flat in the workers' quarters near the depot, concrete walls, a ceiling fan with one missing blade, a generator he ran for exactly 2 hours every night. He cooked his own food. He wore the orange vest like a second skin with no shame and no apology. But the men on his crew noticed things, small things, the kind of things you only catch if you are paying very close attention. His colleague Ifeanyi noticed first. Emmanuel can quote business figures like other men quote football scores, Ifeanyi would say. Waste management statistics, logistics costs, municipal contract values off the top of his head like breathing. So he reads, Bolu would reply. Bolu, I read, you read. We cannot do what he does. There was also the matter of the phone calls. Emmanuel would step away and walk far enough that you could not hear, but not so far that you did not notice. And when he returned, the warmth was back and the easy smile was back. But for just a moment, the posture was different, straighter, quieter, more still. The voice from that posture was not the voice of a sanitation worker. It was the voice of a man who controlled rooms. And then there was the government official, a man whose face appeared on road billboards, whose name opened doors in this state and 3 others. His car had broken down 2 streets over on a Thursday morning. He had walked to where Emmanuel was walking, hat metaphorically in hand, voice low and urgent. Mr. Ose, we need to resolve the timeline. The committee is asking. Emmanuel had not looked up immediately. He finished what he was doing, set down his equipment, and then turned. Tell them Thursday, I'll be there. The official nodded and walked back to his car. Ifeanyi had become extremely interested in a broken rubbish bin nearby. He didn't mention it to anyone for 3 days. When he finally told Bolu, Bolu said nothing. They both went home that evening and sat quietly for a long time. Emmanuel Ose met Adaize 14 months ago on a Tuesday morning on a red clay road during the Harmattan. She was waiting for a keke outside her compound gate. The PSP truck rumbled past and hit a pothole, a deep, treacherous, long-suffering pothole that the local government had been promising to fix for 6 years. A bag shifted. An unfortunate tide of unpleasantness splashed towards the roadside. Adaize's shoes, her good shoes, her teaching shoes, were destroyed. She stared at them. She stared at the truck. She drew one long, slow, deliberate breath, and then this woman looked up and said with perfect composure and precise diction, the audacity of infrastructure. Emmanuel stopped the truck. He climbed down, looked at the shoes, and looked at her. Madam, I am very sorry. I will replace the shoes. You will replace the shoes, she repeated, one eyebrow perfectly raised. From my pocket, yes. She studied him the way you study a passage you have read twice and are still not sure you have understood. Your name? Emmanuel. Adaize, you do not have to replace the shoes, but you can buy me a Fanta while I wait for the next keke because I am now late and I need to calm down before...
Emmanuel Ose was not from Omueze. He was Ghanaian by birth, Nigerian by 12 years of deliberate choice. He spoke Igbo with an accent that made children giggle and elders nod with approval. He knew every compound head on his 3 serviced streets. He remembered birthdays. He brought kola nut when visiting. He apologized to the earth when he had to uproot a plant. By every visible measure, he was a simple man. He rented a flat in the workers' quarters near the depot. Concrete walls, a ceiling fan with one missing blade, a generator he ran for exactly 2 hours every night. He cooked his own food. He wore the orange vest like a second skin, with no shame and no apology. But the men on his crew noticed things, small things, the kind of things you only catch if you are paying very close attention. His colleague Ifeanyi noticed first. Emmanuel can quote business figures the way other men quote football scores, Ifeanyi would say. Waste management statistics, logistics costs, municipal contract values, off the top of his head, like breathing. So he reads, Bolu would reply. Bolu, I read. You read. We cannot do what he does. There was also the matter of the phone calls. Emmanuel would step away and walk far enough that you could not hear, but not so far that you did not notice. And when he returned, the warmth was back, and the easy smile was back, but for just a moment the posture was different, straighter, quieter, more still. The voice that came from that posture was not the voice of a sanitation worker. It was the voice of a man who controlled rooms. And then there was the government official, a man whose face appeared on road billboards, whose name opened doors in this state and 3 others. His car had broken down 2 streets over on a Thursday morning. He had walked to where Emmanuel was working, hat metaphorically in hand, voice low and urgent. Mr. Ose, we need to resolve the timeline. The committee is asking. Emmanuel had not looked up immediately. He finished what he was doing, set down his equipment, and then turned. Tell them Thursday, I'll be there. The official nodded and walked back to his car. Ifeanyi had become extremely interested in a broken rubbish bin nearby. He did not mention it to anyone for 3 days. When he finally told Bolu, Bolu said nothing. They both went home that evening and sat quietly for a long time. Emmanuel met Adaize 14 months ago on a Tuesday morning on a red clay road during the Harmattan. She was waiting for a keke outside her compound gate. The PSP truck rumbled past and hit a pothole, a deep, treacherous, long-suffering pothole that the local government had been promising to fix for 6 years. A bag shifted. An unfortunate tide of unpleasantness splashed towards the roadside. Adaize's shoes, her good shoes, her teaching shoes, were destroyed. She stared at them. She stared at the truck. She drew one long, slow, deliberate breath. And then this woman looked up and said with perfect composure and precise diction, the audacity of infrastructure. Emmanuel stopped the truck. He climbed down, looked at the shoes, and looked at her. Madam, I am very sorry. I will replace the shoes. You will replace the shoes, she repeated, one eyebrow perfectly raised. From my pocket, yes. She studied him the way you study a passage you have read twice and are still not sure you understood. Your name? Emmanuel. Emmanuel, I am Adaize. You do not have to replace the shoes, but you can buy me a Fanta while I wait for the next keke, because I am now late and I need to calm down before I face 40 JSS2 students. He bought the Fanta. He stayed until the keke came, 11 minutes in all. She asked him 4 questions about logistics that genuinely startled him. He said something about Purple Hibiscus, the novel she was carrying, something so unexpectedly precise about trauma and silence that she forgot to flag the keke. The keke came and went. Neither of them mentioned it. He hid a smile. She was already thinking about the next question. 2 weeks later, behind the church compound, sharing suya from a newspaper wrap, the evening settling around them like something comfortable and known, Adaize set down her suya. Emmanuel, you are not what you appear to be. He chewed slowly, thoughtfully. What do I appear to be? A PSP worker. And I am one. But that is not all you are. He turned to look at her then, and something moved behind his eyes, something between a confession and a test. She held his gaze, did not blink. You are very perceptive, Adaeze, he said quietly. I am a literature teacher. Subtext is my entire career. He smiled and said nothing more. She let him get away with it, for now. And so, over the weeks that followed, they fell into each other like two rivers falling into the same sea, not with collision, but with a quiet, inevitable merging that neither of them could have stopped, even if they had tried. It began with conversations, small ones at first, the kind that cost nothing and revealed everything. He would call in the evenings, just as the sun was letting go of the sky, and they would talk about things that had nothing to do with anything, and yet had everything to do with everything. She told him about a student, a boy named Chidi, 13 years old, whose essay about his father had made her sit quietly at her desk, tears staining the register. Emmanuel had listened without interruption. Then, in his calm, deliberate way, he had said, "That boy will be a writer or a lawyer. Either way, someone should be paying attention." "I am," she replied. "I know. That's why you are a good teacher." It was not a grand compliment. It was precise. And precision, Adaeze had come to understand, was Emmanuel's particular form of affection. She teased him often. "You quote logistics figures the way poets quote Neruda," she told him one evening, over rice and pepper soup, at the small buka on Nkwo Road, a place he had found somehow, despite not being from Umweze. "Is that a compliment?" he asked. "It is an observation. From a literature teacher. From someone beginning to suspect," she said, pointing her spoon gently at him, "that you are entirely too comfortable with numbers for a man who collects refuse." He smiled into his pepper soup. "Refuse teaches you a great deal about numbers. What people throw away tells you exactly what they value, and what they value tells you everything about where the money moves." She filed it in the growing room at the back of her mind, behind the growing door. There was an evening they sat on the low wall outside her compound long after they should have gone inside. The neighborhood settled into its night sounds, generators humming, a distant radio, the smell of wood smoke drifting through the air. "What do you want?" she asked him, not romantically, philosophically, the way she asked her students to think about characters they studied. Not what you have, not what you do. What do you actually want? He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then, "I want to build things that last after I am gone. I want the work to mean something beyond the money it makes." He paused. "And I want someone beside me who is not impressed by the wrong things." She felt that land somewhere deep. "What are the wrong things?" she asked quietly. He looked at her. "You already know. That's why I am sitting on this wall with you instead of somewhere else with someone else." She looked away first, at the street, at nothing, her heart doing something she chose not to examine too closely. "Not yet." "You are very strange, Emmanuel," she said finally. "Yes," he agreed without apology. "I haven't decided if that's good or bad. Let me know when you do." She noticed everything. She could not help it. A literature teacher reads not just pages, but rooms, silences, the spaces between words where the real story lives. She noticed the way waiters looked at him, not with mild indifference reserved for ordinary customers, but with subtly straightening, a slight increase in attentiveness, as if some part of them recognized authority they could not name. She noticed the quality of his watch, simple, understated, the kind of restraint only very expensive things afford. She noticed that he never spoke about money, but spoke fluently about everything money built: infrastructure, systems, policy, legacy. She noticed that he listened to her the way most people only listen to those they need something from, completely, without distraction, as if what she said was not merely interesting, but important in a way he quietly catalogued for later. It undid her, that listening. More than anything else, it undid her. And so she arrived without fanfare at her decision. She would not pull at the threads. She understood, with the instinct of someone who had loved difficult books her whole life, that some stories demand patience, that the most extraordinary reveals are always preceded by the longest silences, that a man who carried himself the way Emmanuel carried himself, with that deep, unshakable stillness, that unhurried certainty, was not a man concealing shame. He was a man waiting for the right moment. And she, Adaeze Onkonkwo, who had spent 32 years being underestimated by people who never bothered to read past her cover, understood better than anyone what it meant to carry more than you showed. So she would wait, she would watch, she would let him remain exactly what he was, her mystery, her question, her slow-burning, impossible, quietly extraordinary Emmanuel,
until he was ready to become her answer. She did not know the answer was already on its way. She did not know that in the weeks ahead, she would sit across from her mother in a kerosene-lit room and say a name that would change everything. She did not know what that name would cost her or what it would ultimately return. All she knew on that quiet evening, on that low wall with the wood smoke and the generators, and the man beside her who was somehow both ordinary and oceanic, was that she was not afraid. She had chosen to trust what she felt over what she could prove, and she had never, in all her life, been more certain of anything. The following morning, Adaeze woke with a quiet sense of resolve. The city outside her window hummed as usual, motorbikes rattling, vendors shouting, the distant clatter of a PSP truck on uneven roads. But inside her small flat, everything felt still, charged with anticipation. She poured her tea slowly, savoring the warmth that spread through her hands, thinking of Emmanuel, of the quiet certainty that had settled between them on the low wall the night before. And as she sipped, her mind wandered to the family she had yet to introduce him to, the people whose lives, like hers, were bound by traditions, expectations, and questions that demanded answers. She had imagined this moment countless times, but imagination rarely prepared her for the weight of reality. Emmanuel had become more than a companion. He had become a quiet storm in her life, subtle, precise, impossible to ignore. And now, the life she had carefully organized, the roles she had carefully played, were about to be confronted with a man who refused to fit any mold. The thought made her both nervous and exhilarated. She had rehearsed what she might say, but rehearsals, she knew, were for strangers. Emmanuel was no stranger. He would not respond to scripts. He never had. And as she considered how he would meet her mother's eyes, her father's questions, her siblings' curious stares, she felt the same mix of fear and certainty she had felt on the first evening they had truly spoken, that strange, steady knowledge that some things are inevitable. And so, with her tea finished and her heart steady, Adaeze stepped out into the day, carrying more than just her handbag. She carried the quiet resolve of someone who had decided to trust the man she had learned to read, to trust the love that had grown in whispered conversations, shared silences, and moments that mattered in ways the world would never notice. The introduction, she realized, was not just about names or faces. It was about worlds colliding, truths revealed, and the courage to let them all see what she had already seen in Emmanuel. The introduction ceremony happened on a Saturday in October. Mama Chidinma had not wanted it to happen, but Adaeze was 32, stubborn, and had her father's jaw, a jaw that had never in its life retreated from a decision. So Mama Chidinma chose the only option left. She showed up. Emmanuel came with 4 men, his crew members, Ifeanyi, Bolu, 2 others, dressed in clean agbadas, solemn-faced, performing the role of family delegates with the gravity of ambassadors. Emmanuel had mentioned family coming from Accra, something about timing, something about the journey.
Mama Chidima's relatives took this as the first sign of something wrong. A man with no family present is a man with something to hide. They were not entirely wrong about the hiding, just wrong about what was being hidden. Emmanuel himself moved through that room like water through sand. He wore deep blue, fitted, precise, not flashy. He greeted every elder by name and title before they introduced themselves. He poured drinks without being asked. He spoke in proverbs that made the oldest men nod despite their reservations. And when the bride price was announced, he placed the envelope on the table immediately. Exact amount, correct figure, no negotiation. Before they finished stating the number, Mama Tochukwu leaned to her husband. He knew the figure before they told him. Lucky guess. There is no lucky guess with bride price. Either you researched it or someone very close to this family told him. Her husband had no answer. Neither of them slept particularly well that night. The wedding was small, Adaize's choice. Emmanuel had said she could have any size she wanted, which she found strange, but filed away under the growing folder titled Things About Emmanuel That Make No Sense But I Have Decided Not to Question Yet. The mockery intensified in the days before. Small wedding because the man cannot afford more. She is ashamed. Big wedding means too many people see who she married. My cousin saw the PSP truck parked outside her house, the truck itself. Mrs. Eze sent a message to the teachers' group chat. We all support Adaize in whatever choice she makes. She is our colleague and our sister. God bless the union. Then 30 seconds later, a private message to 2 specific teachers. Can you imagine? A whole university graduate. God have mercy on her. Adaize's sister Chioma called on a Sunday. Sister, you know Kene just booked the venue, Victoria Island, the one with the chandelier, and the car he got for me. Sister, when God is faithful, he is just faithful, you know. When you marry the right, tell Kene I say congratulations. Are you okay? You sound tired. You know you can always. I am perfectly fine, Chioma. She ended the call, sat quietly for a moment. Emmanuel appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea and digestive biscuits. He said nothing. He sat beside her. She leaned into him. That was enough. At the reception held in the church hall with simple decorations and food so plentiful and good that even the most skeptical aunties came back for thirds, Emmanuel danced with Adaize. Not for the crowd, not for the video, for her, just her. She leaned up to his ear over the music. They are all watching us and judging. I know. Does it bother you? He twirled her once, gently. Does the moon lose sleep because a dog barks at it? She laughed, loud, real, head thrown back. You and your proverbs. I learned from an Igbo man. He said it is the only way to say something and still sound wise when you are not fully certain. Are you certain about this? He stopped moving for just one moment, looked at her, just at her. About this, Adaize, I am the most certain I have ever been about anything. She held his gaze, and for the first time since all of this began, the whispers, the WhatsApp messages, her mother's grief, her sister's comparisons, all of it fell away. Just the music, just him, just this. 3 days after the wedding, a black Mercedes-Benz with government license plates pulled onto their street. It did not stop at their house. It stopped 3 houses down. The man inside rolled down his window, asked the child who Mr. Emmanuel Osei was. The child pointed down the road. The man looked, sat back, made a phone call, sat in that car for 20 minutes, then drove away. Ifeanyi saw it from across the street. He went home, sat down, said nothing to anyone. But from that day forward, Ifeanyi began to pay very close attention. Their first year of marriage was quiet and good. Not perfect, good. The kind of good that asks nothing of you and gives you everything you didn't know you needed. Emmanuel left early, always. Most mornings he went to the depot. Some mornings he went somewhere he described simply as a thing. He was always back by evening. He cooked when she was tired. He fixed things around the flat, plumbing, wiring, the wardrobe door that had refused to close properly since they moved in. The electrical rewiring was what started making her serious. The way he approached it, methodical, precise, referencing codes she didn't know he knew, was not the approach of a man who had watched a YouTube tutorial. This was the approach of someone who understood systems, complex ones. She filed it. The laptop appeared on a Thursday. New, slim, expensive, pointedly expensive. A borrowed one, he said. She said nothing. The 2 a.m. phone call with a UK country code appeared on a Tuesday. He stepped outside, walked to the far end of the street, and returned 20 minutes later with a face so carefully rearranged into calm that the effort of the rearranging was itself a kind of tell. She said nothing. Then there was the morning a government official's black car idled outside their compound for 15 minutes. She mentioned it casually. He turned the page of his newspaper. Wrong address, probably. He did not look up. His breathing did not change, not 1 centimeter. She thought about it in the quiet hours. She had married him knowing he was a mystery. She had chosen that with open eyes. But some nights, lying awake and listening to him breathe beside her, she felt the weight of the unknown like a third person in their bedroom. Not a frightening presence, just there. Who are you, Emmanuel? Who are you really? She asked him once, directly. They were eating, eba and egusi, and he was reaching for the soup. Emmanuel, who are you? He paused, set down the eba and looked at her. I am your husband. That is not what I asked. It is the most true thing I can say. She studied him. Are you in trouble? Are you hiding from something? Because if I need to be afraid, I need to know. He reached across the table and took her hand. Adeaze, I promise you, you will never need to be afraid. I will explain everything, every single thing, when the time is right. That is a very unsatisfying answer. I know. I'm sorry. You don't look sorry. No, I'm not. 10 days before the 3 weeks were up, Adeaze came home to an empty flat. Emmanuel was not there, but on the kitchen table sat a sealed envelope. Her name, his handwriting. She stood in front of it for a long time without touching it. Then she opened it. Inside was 1 card, cream paper, simple. In 3 weeks, everything changes. You have been patient than I deserved. I want you to know every single thing I am and every single thing I have is yours. It always was. Forgive me for the delay. E. She read it once, twice, 3 times. Then she sat down on the kitchen floor, just sat there on the floor, card in both hands, her heart doing something large and complicated that she did not yet have words for. 3 weeks.
After 6 months, everything began to change. It started with the cars. 7 of them, black, large, moving through Umweze in convoy. The kind of convoy that makes keke riders pull over and market women shade their eyes. The kind that makes compound gates slowly swing open as people step out to look. They stopped on a Wednesday morning outside the workers' quarters on Depot Street, where Emmanuel and Adaize Osei lived. Doors opened, men in suits stepped out, women in company uniforms. 2 men at the rear who were unmistakably security, the kind who scan a room before anyone walks into it. Mama Tochukwu saw it from her compound window. She called 4 people before the second car door was fully open. Mrs. Eze was on her way to school. She stopped on the road, stood completely still, her school bag dangling from one hand. Mama Chidinma, on her way to the morning market, turned around and walked back. A crowd gathered, not quickly, the careful way people gather when they are not sure what they are gathering for. Staying just close enough to see, just far enough to deny they were watching. Then, the front door of the workers' quarters opened and Emmanuel stepped out. Not in the orange vest, not in the soft house clothes Adaize usually sent him off in a tailored charcoal grey suit that had been built specifically for his body. He walked into the morning light and stood there with an ease that was completely new, and yet somehow entirely familiar, as if the suit was the truth and everything else had been the costume. The door of the lead vehicle opened. An old man stepped out,
silver-haired, broad. His suit alone cost more than the building they were standing in front of, and he wore it the way a man wears something he has never had to think about. He looked at Emmanuel, smiled. "You are late, as usual." "I am exactly on time. I am simply never early." The old man laughed, a full, warm, genuine laugh. He crossed the distance between them and embraced Emmanuel, held him, then pulled back, looked around the compound, at the zinc roof, at the cracked concrete gate, at the ceiling fan visible through the open window with its missing blade. "Emmanuel, this is really where you have been living." "Yes, Papa." The old man shook his head, but he was still smiling. Emmanuel looked up, through the crowd, past all of them, found Adaize's eyes in the window, like he always could, like he always did. He raised his hand, gently. "Come." She came. No heels, no makeup, wrapper tied at her waist, house dress, the soft yellow one she wore on Saturdays, because she was a woman who had never once performed for a crowd and was not about to start now. She walked through her gate and stood beside her husband. He took her hand, turned to the old man. "Papa, my wife, Adaize Onko Osei." The old man's face changed, warmed, formalized, both at once. He bowed, actually bowed to her. "Ne, my name is Solomon Osei, Emmanuel's father. I have heard extraordinary things about you from my son. I apologize that we are meeting on a roadside. You deserve far better than this." Adaize looked at her husband. He looked back at her. "I owe you an explanation and an apology, and then I want to show you something." The explanation took 20 minutes. Emmanuel Osei, second son, designated heir of Solomon Osei, Ghanaian Nigerian industrialist, founder of Osei Holdings, waste management, logistics, real estate, renewable energy, 7 African countries, 3 beyond the continent, net worth, independently verified and recently published at numbers that made the word billion feel inadequate. He had built the waste management division himself, not inherited it, not walked into it, built it, from a single truck, a municipal contract that every other serious investor had laughed at. Too small, too unglamorous, too dirty. He had worked in the trucks for the first 5 years, personally. You cannot build a system you don't understand from the inside, and you cannot understand it from the inside if you are afraid to be inside it. He came to Umueze for the final municipal contract in an evaluation series, planned to stay 3 months, work undercover, assess the system. Then, a pothole destroyed a teacher's shoes on a Tuesday morning. He stayed for 14 months. He looked at Adaize as he said this, only at her. "I was going to tell you before we married. I tried 3 times, and then I looked at you, and I thought, what if knowing changes the way you see me? Because the way you have always seen me, Adaize, like I am simply a man, simply Emmanuel, not a figure, not a name in a business journal, not a number in a portfolio. I have never had that, not from anyone. I could not risk losing it." The crowd was still. No whispers, no murmuring. Even Mama Tochukwu was quiet. Mama Chidinma's hand was over her mouth. Mrs. Eze had forgotten entirely about the JSS2 class waiting for her. Chioma, who had somehow been called and arrived breathless at the edge of the gathering, stood with both hands pressed to her cheeks. Ifeanyi, standing at the back, said nothing. He just nodded slowly, like a man who had always suspected something true and now was watching it confirmed.
Everyone was waiting for Adaize. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You worked in that truck for 14 months. Yes. Every Tuesday and Friday. Yes. Emmanuel, do you know what they said about me? Do you know what my mother went through? What they called you?" His jaw tightened, just slightly. "I know. And you said nothing. I wanted to protect what we had. I needed to know who you were when choosing you cost you something. And?" The slowest, most certain smile she had ever seen on a human face.
and you were magnificent." She looked at him. He looked at her. The crowd watched two people communicate in a language that required no translation. Then Adaize Okonkwo Osei, secondary school teacher, woman of extraordinary composure, put one hand on her hip, pointed one finger at her husband, and said, "You are going to owe me the most extravagant apology of the 21st century." He laughed, head back, eyes closed, completely unguarded. "Name the price." "Give me a moment, I am still calculating." And the crowd, because crowds cannot help themselves, erupted.
Mama Chidima sat in silence for 2 full days. On the 3rd day, Emmanuel came to her himself, with his father, with yam and palm wine. He sat for 3 hours. He let her speak. He never interrupted. When she finished, he said simply, "Mama, if I had a daughter, I would have feared for her too. I did not make things easy. I am sorry." She called Adaize that night. "Your husband came to see me." "I know. Why didn't you tell me?" "Mama, I did not fully know either. Not all of it. But you stayed, even not knowing. I knew what mattered." Silence. "You have your father's sense," Mama Chidima said finally. "That man could also see things in people that nobody else could see." It was the greatest compliment she had ever given her daughter. It was the first time Adaize cried through this entire story. Mrs. Eze sent a very long message to the teacher's WhatsApp group. She had always sensed something special about Emmanuel, had told people from the beginning. Sometimes a woman just knows. Several teachers replied with fire emojis. One replied with a quiet, 1 month later, she approached Adaize in the staff room. "You always seemed confident about him, even when we didn't understand." "Do you know why I teach literature, Mrs. Eze?" "Why?" "Because I believe in reading past the cover. The title never tells you the whole story. Neither does the first chapter." She lifted her tea. "It took me 32 years and a very stubborn man to prove it, but I was right." Mrs. Eze nodded and said nothing, which from her was an enormous response. Chioma sent a voice note. The first 40 seconds were crying. Then, "Sister, I am so sorry. I was showing off about Kene, and you were sitting with. I didn't know. I was wrong, and I love you. And please tell your husband I'm sorry too." Adaize replied, "Chioma, your Kene is a good man. Different kinds of wealth. Don't forget that." After that, Chioma's Sunday calls became something Adaize actually looked forward to. Ifeanyi was offered a supervisory position in the Umueze expansion branch before Emmanuel finished the sentence. He accepted immediately, went home, stood in his kitchen for 15 minutes, just stood there. "I knew. I didn't know what I knew, but I knew something," he told his wife. "Every man who meets Emmanuel says that afterward," she replied. "Because it's true. Or because you all wish you had noticed." He thought about it. "Both," he said honestly. "Definitely both." They built a home on the hill at the edge of Umueze. Emmanuel had shown her properties in Lagos, Accra, London, Nairobi. She had been polite about every single one. He knew polite. He knew her. One Sunday, driving back through the village, she said, "Stop here." She stood on a plot of land above the market and looked down at everything: the zinc roofs, the red clay roads, the church spire, the borehole queue, the PSP truck making its way slowly down Obi Street in the distance. "Here," she said. "Here? This is home, not because we have to stay, because I choose to." They built the house over 18 months, 4 bedrooms, a library because Adaize had always wanted a library and had never quite said it loudly enough for anyone to hear. Emmanuel heard it. A wide veranda looking out over everything, the whole village below. A garden with okra, uziza,
and utazi that Emmanuel had learned to grow from the old man 3 streets over in exchange for help fixing a water pump. The orange vest was on the shelf in their bedroom, folded neatly between a framed photo and a small clay pot Mama Chidima had given them at the wedding. Adaze asked him once why he kept it. "Because I am not ashamed of it, because I want to remember that the work that matters most is often the work people look away from." He touched it lightly. "And because this is what I was wearing when I made the best decision I ever made." She looked at him for a long moment. "You are going to make me cry at 8 in the morning before I've even had my tea." "I know, sorry." "You are not sorry, not even a little." On a night on the veranda, their daughter Chisom asleep inside, Emmanuel had palm wine and Adaeze had the herbal tea of her 3rd trimester. The village lit up below them, small lights in the darkness. "Chisom, God is with me." Because he was. He always had been. "Emmanuel, if you could go back, would you do it differently?" He was quiet. The crickets, the palm wine, the night. "I would tell you sooner." "How much sooner?" "Second date, the suya behind the church." "Why didn't you?" "Because you asked who I was and you actually wanted the answer. Just the answer. Not the net worth, not the title. Just me. And you didn't trust that you could give me all of it at once." "Yes." "Emmanuel." "I would have stayed." "I know that now." "You should have known it then." "Yes, I should have." She reached across and took his hand. They sat like that for a long time, 2 people on a hill, the village below them, the whole long story behind them. "Emmanuel." "Thank you for choosing me when choosing me was difficult." She looked out at the lights, not at him, but her hand tightened on his. "You know what I always told my students about difficult books?" "What?" "Never stop at a hard chapter. That is almost always where the story gets good." He said nothing, which, from him, was everything.
Umueze found a new story to tell. Not the story of the woman who married a garbage man, but the story of the woman who saw what no one else was patient enough to see, who chose without certainty, who stood in fire without flinching, who loved a man for exactly what he was before she knew the size of everything he had, and the man who hid himself, not from cowardice, but from the deepest human hunger there is, the need to be chosen for who you are, not what you have. The orange vest is still on that shelf. Adaeze still teaches at the school down the road. She turned down 4 promotions in Lagos. Emmanuel thinks it is because she loves it. He is right. Their daughter Chisom is growing up on a hill with a library in her house and a mother who reads to her every evening, and a father who tends a garden and never once lets her believe that the value of work is determined by who watches it being done. In Umueze, there's still talk about that Wednesday morning. The 7 black cars, the suited old man, the woman in her yellow wrapper who walked out of her gate like a queen who had never once forgotten she was one. They talk about the lesson, the one nobody asked for and everyone needed. You cannot judge a river by the mud on its banks. Quiet water runs the deepest, and the most dangerous thing a person can assume is that they already know what they are looking at. Umueze learned this. It cost them nothing but their pride. But pride, as any elder will tell you, is the most expensive thing most people own, and the last thing any of them should have bought. They mocked her for marrying a PSP worker. What they didn't realize was they were only ever mocking themselves. And to my amazing viewers across the world, from the United States, France, Jamaica, Kenya, Germany, the United Kingdom, Canada, South Africa, and beyond, thank you for pointing out the errors in the first version. I truly value your feedback, and because of you, this story is now told the way it deserves to be told. Your support means everything to me.